Greetings, travelers. Welcome back to the Fractured and Alterac Valley Wild review, this time for the Mage class. Right now in Wild, Mage is basically a combo class because all of the other Mage archetypes have been kind of power crept out, leaving only Ignite Mage or some form of APM Mage as being the viable options. Unfortunately, that means that if the card doesn't fit in an archetype like that, it might not see play in Wild, at least not at first. But the Mage cards in Alterac Valley also have this other thing going to them, where most of them feed into themselves as kind of a new archetype, a big spell archetype. Big spell mages existed before. These cards at least give it a new layer, some new tricks. So let's take a look and see how those can play out. The first one up is ArcaneBrilliance. 4 mana arcane spell, add a copy of a 7, 8, 9, and 10 cost spell in your deck to your hand. This compares, obviously, as a reskin of Juicy Psych Melon. Juicy Psych Melon back in the day broke Druid in half. Aviana Kun died for Juicy Psych Melon's sins, which, to be fair, they probably would have had to have nerfed Aviana Kun at some point anyway, given what they keep designing for Druid, but let's not worry about that. Does ArcaneBrilliance break Mage? Well, there are some parallels. Mage does have some mana cheat tools for big spells, things like Dragoncaster, Clumsy Courier, and a couple of new cards that we're going to talk about, like also Naga Sandwich if you're into memes. The trick with that is usually the payoff's not good compared to what you can do with like cheap spells in Sorcerer's Apprentice and compared to what the other good classes are doing. If you're cheating spells, then you want those spells to do something absolutely backbreaking. Puzzle Boxy, Yogg-Saron, Power of Creation are probably the best examples. This also kind of fits into a weird hand mage thing. I don't really think that's that significant, honestly. The long and the short of it is this card's not broken, and it might be awkward in the decks that you're designed to use it with. Now, does that mean C tier or B tier? We're going to go ahead and call this one C tier. I think that's a conservative estimate. Next up, Shivering Sorceress. 1 mana, 2/2 minion. Battle Cry, reduce the cost of the highest cost spell in your hand by 1. I've heard some hype around this card pertaining to 2 archetypes in particular. Luna's Pocket Galaxy Mage and Secret Mage. You can play this card and then be able to play Luna's Pocket Galaxy on 6. Hopefully you're not dead. Then you can do Luna's Pocket Galaxy stuff and turn the tides. The other one is Secret Mage, as kind of redundancy for Cabal Courier and Kirintor Mage. I'm not really that impressed with this card fitting into either of those archetypes because this only cheats 1 mana. To be more frank, it lets you bank mana, which is kind of Mage's approach to mana cheating with like Conjure Mana Biscuit and stuff. So you get a little bit of a discount in addition to having a 1 mana 2/2 body. Kind of like Bloodsail deckhand, but this isn't a pirate. It doesn't trade very well with pirates. If this minion were a pirate and warrior or rogue, this card would be insane. This minion being typeless and mage is a little underwhelming. We'll call it C tier. Next is Amplified Snow Flurry. 2 mana 2/3, Battle Cry, your next hero power costs 0 and freezes the target. Compare this to Tour Guide, which is 1 mana, make a hero power cost 0, so 1 mana hero power. This is 2 mana hero power, which is, checks notes, exactly the amount of mana that you normally would pay for a hero power. You can bank mana with this one, like you can play this one the turn before you'd use the next hero power, but it's okay. The freezing the target part's the more relevant part, which is actually pretty strong. This is a like 2 mana play. It's a pretty strong body compared to Tour Guides. It's not very powerful, but it's not bad. We'll also call this one C tier. Next is Rune of the Archmage. 9 mana, cast 20 mana worth of mage spells at the enemies. So compare this to Puzzle Box, Yogg-Saron, or Solarian Prime. In Wild, there are a lot of mage spells, so there's a lot of variance to this card. You could get Puzzle Box, you could get Flame Strike, you could get like Ruby Spellstone, or you could get like a First Flame. You can get a lot of small things and a lot of big ones. They all add up to 20 mana, so hopefully you're actually getting like 20 mana worth of value for 9 mana. But Puzzle Box usually gives you around 40 mana worth of value on average, so it doesn't quite compare favorably, but you can get Puzzle Box off of this. You can draw cards off of this. There's a potential to high roll with all the cheaty things that you can do in Mage. Redundancy with Puzzle Box, being able to play this with Grey Sage Parrot, I guess it's okay. If there's a deck that plays this, it's not a good deck, but it might be useful. We'll call it C tier. Next is Mass Polymorph, 7 mana arcane spell, transform all minions into 1/1 sheep. So old school, like, control-y Reno Mage decks love this card. Yeah, okay, alright. That deck doesn't really exist or have very much going for it right now, but this can neutralize some very scary things. Neutralizes giants, neutralizes big demons, neutralizes buffed minions. It's kind of the great equalizer. Kind of expensive, but for an AoE spell like this one, it kind of has to be. Is it going to see play in modern context? No. Will it see play at some point? Definitely yes. So we're going to call this one B tier. Next is Iceblood Tower. 10 mana. At the end of your turn, cast another spell from your deck, last 3 turns. Compared to the other objective cards that we've reviewed so far, this one is actually a very powerful effect. If you think of the amount of mana that this cheats, especially if you are playing like Clumsy Courier or something. You Clumsy Courier or Dragon Caster, play this thing, and then at the end of your turn, you get an expensive spell. Then your next turn, you get an expensive spell. Then your next turn, you get an expensive spell. You're spending 6 or 7 mana to play this on turn 7 and then cheat you probably get about 20 mana worth of value out of it, maybe 30, depending on what you're playing in your deck. You can cast Puzzle Boxes, you can cast Rune of the Archmages, things like that, right? So in a deck that wants to play those kinds of cards, this card is really good. The trouble is that deck is usually not good, so your mileage may vary. If there's ever a deck that does have expensive spells and that deck is good, this card is probably the center pin of that deck. I'm kind of a sucker for big spells sometime, and I think this one has potential. So I'm actually going to call this one B tier. Next is Belinda Stonehearth. 6 mana, 5/5 minion, Battlecry, draw 2 spells, swap their costs with minion stats. It's a very narrow legendary, obviously designed to work in the big spell mage kind of deck. As a mana cheat, like let's say you play this on 6, you draw like Iceblood Tower and something else, and you make like a 6 mana 10/9 or 10/8 or something. A 6 mana 10/8 that drew you 2 cards is probably really good. Again, like contextually in Wild, this card doesn't do anything right now, but in the future, could this card do something? Maybe. It's more likely to be a meme card than it is to be a playable card, because again, like 6 mana is a lot to pay for something like this sometimes. It requires that you play certain kinds of cards that are usually not good in Wild. If I rated this anything above C tier, I think it would be a little ambitious. Next up is Build a Snowman. 3 mana Frost spell. Summon a 3/3 snowman that freezes. Add Build a Snowbrute to your hand. Build a Snowbrute is just this card, but 6 mana. Summon a 6/6. Put a Snow Ogre card in your hand, which is the same thing, but 9 mana, make a 9/9. So this is Pyros reskinned. Pyros used to be a playable card way back in the day, but it hasn't been a playable card in a very long time. Making a rare version of that costs a little more, yeah, I'm not buying it. D tier. Next is Siphon mana, 2 mana arcane spell, deal 2 damage, honorable kill, reduce the cost of spells in your hand by 1. Some people are freaking out about this card a little bit in Sorcerer's Apprentice decks, so like APM Mage, PTSD, something like that. I don't think that this is really the best card for something like that, because usually those decks are so dependent on Sorcerer's Apprentice that having this during the combo turn doesn't really do anything for you, assuming you're able to get the effect off. This is more like a setup card though, where you have Siphon mana on curve, you deal with the small minion, and then you get to be able to play Refreshing Spring Water ahead of schedule or something. There are a lot of applications for an effect like this, especially outside of the Sorcerer's Apprentice APM Mage game plan. Unlike Rune Orb or Primordial Glyph, it doesn't generate extra value though. So there are limits to this card. If this card is good, it's going to be as a setup card for something that's truly ridiculous. And at that point, we're going to look at this and be like, man, this card's unfair. If that doesn't happen, then I guess we just don't play this card, and then we don't cry about it. Awesome. We're going to call this one B tier. Magister Dawngrasp, 8 mana hero card. With Battlecry, recast a spell from each spell school that you've cast this game. The hero power is Arcane Burst, which is 2 mana, deal 1 damage, honorable kill, gain +2 damage. So Arcane Burst can level itself up. This card is comparable in a lot of ways to Frost Lich Jaina. The hero power is kind of similar on the face of it, the Battlecry, not so much. This card is designed to be a companion piece to a lot of the other big spell stuff, like you get Arcane, Frost, and Fire, which are the Mage spell schools. So you usually want something expensive with those to make sure you're getting your mana's worth, but you end up in a situation where you're playing a bunch of awkward cards anyway. I think the more likely scenario is Dawngrasp ends up recasting like an AoE spell plus Ice Block plus some like Arcane Intellect or something, which is still pretty okay. I mean, 8 mana is a lot. Comparing it to Frost Lich Jaina, which gave you lifesteal, gave you elementals, and you can continuously make elementals. This is a one and done Battlecry, so not really good comparison there. Arcane Burst is definitely a different feel than Frost Lich Jaina's hero power because you're not making minions. Instead, you're leveling up your hero power to deal more damage. So if you can deal 1 damage, you get a 3 damage hero power. Kill something with 3 health, you get a 5 damage. You can keep ramping that up, and eventually, like, 2 mana deal 5, 2 mana deal 7. That adds up. Still, it's an 8 mana hero, really expensive. Doesn't create a ton of lingering value for the decks that want it, and it's not fast enough to deal with the decks in Wild that will murder you anyway. So I think we're going to have to call this card a C tier card. Mage overall is about average. Some of the cards that stand out to me as eventually seeing play are going to be like the big spell enabler, Iceblood Tower, Mass Polymorph, Siphon Mana are pretty strong. ArcaneBrilliance might rise up to that level, depending on how things shake out. Maybe the same with Shivering Sorceress, which I'm not as impressed with as a lot of people probably are. But altogether, nothing that really stands out as being particularly earth-shaking. So far, that's kind of been the theme of Fractured and Alterac Valley, which is cool cards that look cool and do things, but aren't particularly powerful. So the next class up is Paladin, and we'll see if Paladin bucks the trend with that. So that's going to be the next video. Hope to see you there, friends. Thanks for watching.